welcome you all in BBA and MBA Guide by Samaya Hamid. Today is the 12th lecture about management. The topics we are going to cover today are global environment by Global Trade Organization.
Understanding global environment.
The previous discussion indicates that global trade is alive and well. Regional trade alliances continue to be developed in areas where member countries believe it's in their best interest economically and globally to band together and strengthen their economic position. No, global trade among nations doesn't just happen on its own. As trade issues arise, global trade systems ensure that trade continues efficiently and effectively. Indeed, one of the realities of globalization is the interdependence of countries, that is, what happens in one can impact others, good or bad. For example, the financial crisis that started in the United States in 2008 threw the global economy into a tailspin. Although things spiraled precariously out of control, it didn't completely collapse. Why? Because governmental interventions and trade and financial mechanisms helped avert a potential crisis. We're going to look at 4 important global trade mechanisms: the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank Group, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization, WTO, is a global organization of 153 countries that deals with the rules of trade among nations. Formed in 1995, the WTO evolved from the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, a trade agreement in effect since the end of World War II. Today, the WTO is the only global organization that deals with trade rules among nations. Its membership consists of 153 member countries and 30 observer governments, which have a specific time frame within which they must apply to become members. The goal of the WTO is to help countries conduct trade through a system of rules. Although critics have staged vocal protests against the WTO claiming that global trade destroys jobs and the natural environment, it appears to play an important role in monitoring, promoting, and protecting global trade. For instance, the WTO recently ruled that the European plane maker Airbus received improper European Union subsidies for the A380 Super Jumbo jet and several other airplanes, hurting its American rival, Boeing. Airbus has the right to appeal the ruling, but even after appealing, any member ultimately found to have provided improper subsidies is obliged to bring its policies into compliance with trade rules. Failure to comply could bring trade sanctions. In another recent news story, the US government is weighing whether to file a WTO complaint against China's internet censorship. In addition, the WTO played a pivotal role in keeping global trade active during the global economic crisis. WTO Director General Pascal Lamy said, "During these difficult times, the multilateral trading system has once again proven its value. WTO rules and principles have assisted governments in keeping markets open, and they now provide a platform from which trade can grow as the global economy improves." These examples illustrate the types of trade issues with which the WTO deals. Such issues are best handled by an organization such as the WTO, and it has played, without a doubt, an important role in promoting and protecting global trade. International Monetary Fund and World Bank Group. 2 other important and necessary global trade mechanisms include the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank Group. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, is an organization of 185 countries that promotes international monetary cooperation and provides member countries with policy advice, temporary loans, and technical assistance to establish and maintain financial stability and to strengthen economies. The World Bank Group is a group of 5 closely associated institutions, all owned by its member countries, that provides vital financial and technical assistance to developing countries around the world. The goal of the World Bank Group is to promote long-term economic development and poverty reduction by providing members with technical and financial support. For instance, during the recent global recession, financial commitments by the World Bank Group reached $100 billion as it helped nations respond to and recover from the economic downturn. Both entities have an important role in supporting and promoting global business. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. The forerunner of the OECD, the Organization for European Economic Cooperation, was formed in 1947 to administer American and Canadian aid under the Marshall Plan for the reconstruction of Europe after World War II. Today, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, is a Paris-based international economic organization whose mission is to help its 30 member countries achieve sustainable economic growth and employment and raise the standard of living in member countries while maintaining financial stability in order to contribute to the development of the world economy. When needed, the OECD gets involved in negotiations with OECD countries so they can agree on rules of the game for international cooperation. One current focus is combating small-scale bribery in overseas commerce. The OECD says such so-called facilitation payments are corrosive, particularly on sustainable economic development and the rule of law. With a long history of facilitating economic growth around the globe, the OECD now shares its expertise and accumulated experiences with more than 70 developing and emerging market economies. This is all about today's lecture. Hope you find this video useful. If you find any query, you can ask by commenting below. Please share this video with your friends and fellows. And don't forget to like and subscribe the channel.